I didn't open my door to a greeting. I opened it to the sound of tearing metal. My father, Thomas, was standing in the center of my library, a room I had restored by hand over 3 years, pointing at the north wall. A contractor I had never hired was measuring the distance between the vintage sconces. "Take it down from here," Thomas said, his voice casual, authoritative. "We need at least 12 feet for the crib." I stood there, keys still in my hand, staring at the dust settling on my mahogany desk. "Dad?" I said, the word coming out sharper than I intended. "What are you doing?" He turned, not with guilt, but with annoyance. "Oh, you're back early. Good. We're remodeling. Nathan needs this room for the nursery. It has the best light." I looked at the contractor, then back at my father. "You're remodeling my house without asking me?" Thomas laughed. A dry, dismissive sound. "Don't be dramatic, Allison. It's family property. We're just making it useful. Before we see how this ends, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Family property," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "I bought this brownstone 5 years ago. My name is on the deed. Mine alone." Thomas waved a hand, dismissing my ownership like it was a clerical error. "Because we raised you to be successful. We gave you the tools. This house is just the return on our investment. And right now, your brother needs a return." Nathan stepped out from the hallway, looking around my living room with the critical eye of a buyer. My golden child brother. Failed crypto entrepreneur. Failed restaurateur. And now, apparently, the new owner of my home, his wife, Vanessa, trailed behind him, hand resting protectively on her stomach. "It's a bit dated," Nathan said, ignoring me completely. "But the location is good for investors. We can host the launch party here." "Launch party?" I asked. "You're moving in?" "Jennifer is pregnant," Thomas said, as if that explained everything. "They need stability. They need space. You live here alone with a cat. It's selfish, Allison. Hoarding all this space while your brother tries to build a future." I looked at them. My father, entitled and commanding. My brother, smug and expectant. My sister-in-law, already mentally measuring my windows for new curtains. And I froze. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even shock. It was conditioning. You might wonder why I didn't scream, why I didn't throw them out right then and there. But when you're raised in a house where your boundaries are treated like suggestions, you don't learn to fight. You learn to freeze. You learn that resistance only makes the punishment worse. They banked on that freeze. They counted on the fact that I had spent 32 years being the good daughter, the fixer, the one who absorbed the chaos so Nathan could shine. They thought my silence was submission. They were wrong. It was calibration. "You're right," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I am selfish. I should have thought about Nathan." Thomas smiled, the victory already settling in his eyes. "See? I knew you'd be reasonable. We're knocking the wall down by noon. You should probably pack a bag. The dust will be terrible." "I will," I said. "I'll go to a hotel. Give you some space." I walked upstairs, packed a small suitcase, and walked back down. I didn't look at the contractor destroying my wall. I didn't look at Nathan, who was already opening a bottle of my wine. I just walked out the door. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to my office. I drove straight to the financial district, parking my car in the secure lot of my consulting firm. My office was quiet, the city lights flickering below like a digital nervous system. I sat at my desk, the leather cool against my skin, and exhaled. For the first time in hours, my hands weren't shaking. I logged into my secure server. I wasn't just an urban planner. I specialized in high-stakes development and asset recovery. I knew how to follow a paper trail. I knew how to find the cracks in a foundation. I started with the deed. I pulled the digital copy, the one with my signature in bold ink. Sole owner. No trust. No co-signers. I printed it out. Then I went to the bank records. I traced the down payment, $200,000. Wire transferred directly from my personal savings account. Money I had earned consulting on infrastructure projects in Dubai and Singapore. Money I had bled for. I printed that too, but I needed more. I needed to understand why now. Why the sudden invasion. Nathan had always been entitled. But this was desperate. I dug deeper. I ran a credit check on my parents. And then I saw it. A foreclosure notice. Dated 6 months ago. They hadn't just sold their house. They had lost it. My childhood home. The one they claimed was their legacy. Was gone. Sold to pay off gambling debts. Nathan's gambling debts. I sat back. The realization washing over me like ice water. They weren't bullying me because they were mean. They were bullying me because they were homeless. They had liquidated everything they owned to save the golden child one last time. And he had burned it all. Now, they were parasites looking for a new host. And then I found the emails. My mother, Patricia, had a shared cloud account I used to manage for her. I logged in. I found a folder labeled Family Updates. I opened it and read email after email to aunts, uncles, cousins. Allison is just holding on to the brownstone for the family trust. She wrote in one, we bought the house in her name for tax purposes. But it's really Nathan's inheritance. She claimed in another, she's just the caretaker until Nathan is ready to settle down. For 10 years. For a decade. While I paid the mortgage. While I paid the taxes. While I paid for the new roof and the plumbing and the restoration. They had been telling everyone I was just the help. They had erased my ownership before they even stepped through the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my chest. They wanted a caretaker? Fine. I would take care of them. I printed every single email. I printed the foreclosure notice. I printed the eviction warning they had received from their temporary rental. I had the receipts. Now I just needed the stage. I didn't go back to the house. Instead, I pulled up the security feed on my laptop. I had installed cameras in every room during the renovation discreet. High definition. Audio enabled. I watched them. They had moved in with terrifying speed. My art was gone from the living room walls, replaced by framed posters of Nathan's failed businesses. My books were boxed up in the hallway. Vanessa was sitting on my sofa, eating takeout, wiping her hands on my throw pillows. This place is huge, she said, her voice tinny through the speakers. We can put the nursery in the library and turn the guest room into your gaming den. Babe, Mom said she's inviting the investors over tonight. Nathan replied, pacing the room. We need to look successful. If I can close this round. We're set. Did you change the Wi-Fi? Thomas asked, walking into the frame. Yeah. Locked her out. Nathan laughed. She can't check her little emails now. They were drinking my vintage wine. A bottle of 1982 Bordeaux I had been saving for my own wedding. They were passing it around in coffee mugs, spilling drops on the Persian rug. I watched, and I analyzed. In psychology, there's a term for this behavior. It's called an extinction burst. When a narcissist or a manipulator feels they are losing control, they don't retreat. They escalate. They double down. They engage in a frantic, explosive display of dominance to force the world back into submission. My parents knew they were broke. They knew they were homeless. But instead of asking for help, they were throwing a party. They were trying to overwrite reality with sheer audacity. They thought if they acted like kings in my castle, they would become kings. They thought they were conquering a kingdom. They were actually standing on a trapdoor. I checked the time. 7 p.m. The investors would be arriving soon. Wealthy. Serious people. People Nathan was trying to scam with a new revolutionary app idea. People who would be very impressed by a historic brownstone in the heart of Boston. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called the power company. Then I called the security firm. And finally, I called the sheriff's department to schedule a civil standby for 9 p.m. I watched the first guests arrive. Thomas was greeting them at the door, playing the benevolent patriarch. Welcome. Welcome. Come into our family home. I closed my laptop. It was time to go to the party. I parked my car down the street, watching the windows of my own house glow with warmth and theft. The party was in full swing. I could see silhouettes moving past the curtains, hear the faint thump of music bleeding into the cool night air. I pulled up the live feed on my phone again. Inside, the living room was packed. 20 or 30 people, investors, extended family. Friends of Nathan I didn't know were eating catered food off my dining table. They were laughing, drinking, completely unaware they were standing on a stage set for a demolition. Thomas moved to the center of the room, tapping a spoon against one of my crystal wine glasses. The sound cut through the chatter, sharp and demanding. The room quieted. He stood by the fireplace, one arm draped around Nathan's shoulders, the other raising a glass high. Attention. Everyone. He boomed, his voice distorted slightly by the microphone compression, but still dripping with unearned pride. If I could have a moment. I watched from the darkness of my car, the screen illuminating my face. It was like watching a nature documentary about a predator that didn't know it was being hunted. To my son, Nathan, Thomas continued, beaming at the investors scattered around the room. A visionary, a leader, and now, the new master of this historic estate. A gift from us. To ensure his future is as bright as his talent. Applause rippled through the room. Nathan beamed, looking every inch the successful heir in a suit I knew he couldn't afford. Vanessa clapped, glowing, accepting congratulations from a man who I recognized as a prominent angel investor in Boston tech circles. It was the ultimate lie, staked on a public stage. A lie so big they thought it could never be challenged, because the sheer audacity of it acted as a shield. They were banking on social contract that no daughter would humiliate her family in front of money. They forgot who they were dealing with. I don't operate on social contracts. I operate on executables. I looked at the time. 9:15. The investors were sufficiently charmed. The lie was solidified. It was time to shatter it. I didn't need to enter the house to take control of it. I had designed the smart home system myself, integrated with a central server I could access from anywhere. I opened the control app. I located the preset I had configured an hour ago. I had named it Eviction. My thumb hovered over the execute button. I took a breath. Not to calm my nerves, but to savor the precision of what was about to happen. I pressed it. Click. On the screen. The room plunged into darkness. The music died instantly. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by the sound of expensive glass shattering on the floor. Darkness swallowed the celebration whole. What's happening? Nathan's voice came through the audio feed, high and panicked. Dad. Check the breaker. Just a moment. Everyone, Thomas shouted, his command wavering. Probably just a fuse. Stay calm. Then, a low mechanical whirring sound filled the silence. The motorized blackout blinds on the main bay window began to descend, sealing the room off from the streetlights outside. The darkness went from accidental to absolute. Is this part of the pitch? An investor asked, sounding annoyed. No. It's Nathan started. And then, a beam of pure white light cut through the dark. I had triggered the high-lumen projector mounted on the ceiling, the one I used for client presentations. It hummed to life, pointing directly at the blank expanse of wall above the fireplace where they had removed my painting. A single image appeared, 10 feet wide, crisp and brutal in the darkness. It wasn't a logo. It wasn't a pitch deck. It was a document, deed of ownership. Property, 42 Oak Street, Boston, Massachusetts. Sole owner, Allison Westwood. Date recorded, June 14th, 2018. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the projector fan and the terrified breathing of my family. What is this? Someone whispered. I tapped my phone screen. The slide changed. Bank transfer, $200,000. From Allison Westwood. To escrow account. Memo. Down payment. Earnings from Dubai contract. Another tap. The slide shifted again, displaying a blown-up screenshot of an email from my mother to my Aunt Carol. Dated 3 years ago. From Patricia Westwood. Subject. Allison's house. She's just the caretaker. Carol. We bought it in her name for tax purposes. But we all know it's really Nathan's inheritance. We're just letting her play house until he needs it. I watched the feed. The investors were reading. Thomas was freezing up, his face pale in the blue light of the projection. Nathan looked like he was watching his own funeral. I wasn't just ruining the party. I was dissecting their narrative, layer by layer, in front of the very audience they needed to survive. I tapped the screen one last time. The final slide appeared. The kill shot. Foreclosure notice. Thomas and Patricia Westwood. Eviction date, October 1st. Reason, non-payment. Gambling debt, liquidation. A murmur went through the crowd, low and dangerous. The investors were looking at each other, then at Nathan, putting the pieces together. The facade wasn't just cracked, it was pulverized into dust. I opened my car door. The show was over. It was time for the curtain call. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The projector's fan hummed like a dying engine, casting the blue light of the foreclosure notice over the faces of the investors. They were backing away from the table, setting their drinks down on the nearest surfaces as if the glasses themselves were contaminated. This is a misunderstanding, Nathan stammered, his face pale in the harsh glare of the projection. He looked at the angel investor, desperation clawing at his voice. She's lying. These are doctored. It's a glitch. I stepped through the front door. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was the only other noise in the room. The police are outside, I said, as if ennui. The heavy oak door swung fully open behind me. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the foyer, followed by the sheriff I had spoken to earlier. The sudden influx of law enforcement sucked the remaining air out of the room. Ms. Westwood? The sheriff asked, her voice calm, authoritative. Here, I said, not taking my eyes off my father. These people are trespassing. I asked them to leave this morning. They broke in, changed the locks, and are now hosting an unauthorized commercial event on my property. The investors didn't wait to be told twice. They streamed past me, muttering apologies, clutching their coats. One of them paused near Nathan, shaking his head with a look of absolute disgust. Don't call me again, he said. The room emptied until it was just my family, the police, and me. The projector was still running, beaming the evidence of their failure onto the wall they had tried to steal. Nathan, I said, pointing to the north wall where the plaster had been stripped away, exposing the lath. You damaged my property. That's vandalism. It's just a wall, Nathan screamed, his face twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. He lunged at me, hands curtailed into fists. You selfish bitch. You ruined everything. Do you know how close I was? The officers intercepted him before he got within 5 feet of me. He struggled, shouting obscenities that echoed off the high ceilings. And they spun him around. Click. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp. Final. You're under arrest for criminal trespassing and vandalism, the officer said, reciting the words like a liturgy. No, Patricia shrieked, grabbing the officer's arm. He's having a baby. You can't take him. He didn't mean it. Ma'am. Step back, or you'll be joining him, the sheriff warned. Her hand resting on her belt, they dragged Nathan out. He was still shouting, blaming me, blaming the contractors, blaming the world. But his voice faded as the patrol car door slammed shut outside. Vanessa stood in the corner, sobbing into her hands, looking at me with eyes full of hate. Where are we supposed to go? She wailed. We gave up our apartment. We have nothing. That sounds like a planning error, I said. Then I turned to my parents. Thomas looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. The arrogance, the bluster, the head of the family persona, it was all gone, replaced by a terrified, pathetic realization. The script had flipped, and he didn't know his lines. Allison, he said, his voice trembling. He took a step toward me, hands out. Please. We have nowhere. We really have nowhere. We sold everything for him. If you kick us out, we're on the street. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me to be a resource, who had spent decades telling me I wasn't enough, who had tried to steal the one thing I had built for myself because they felt entitled to my labor. I searched inside myself for pity, for guilt, for that old familiar feeling that I was the bad guy. I felt nothing. No anger. Just the cold clarity of a balanced ledger. You have the proceeds from the sale, I said. They're gone, Patricia whispered, the truth finally leaking out. We paid his bookies. We paid his old investors. We have nothing. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I had printed it at the office. It was a list of local homeless shelters and state assistance programs. Then you better start calling, I said, placing the paper on the table where the catered food was going cold. You have 5 minutes to get off my property before I have you arrested too. You can't do this to your own mother, she cried, clutching her pearls. We're family. No, I said, walking to the front door and holding it open. The night air rushed in, clean and cold. Your tenants who didn't pay rent, and your lease is up. They left. They walked out into the cold Boston night, carrying nothing but their coats and their shame. I watched them go, watched them get into their car and sit there for a long moment, staring blankly ahead, before the taillights finally disappeared down the street. I closed the door. I locked it. And then, I turned the projector off. I sold the brownstone 3 weeks later. I couldn't live there anymore. The memory of them was in the walls, in the scratched floors where they dragged their furniture, in the air itself. It was an asset. Yes, but it was a tainted asset. I sold it to a developer for $1.8 million cash. I took the money and bought a penthouse in the Seaport District. 24th floor. Doorman. Key card access. No one gets in unless I say so. I sat on my balcony this morning, drinking coffee, watching the sun come up over the harbor. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you can't buy. The kind you have to earn by walking through fire. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. I sent it to voicemail. I don't speak to them anymore. Nathan is divorced. Vanessa left him before the baby was even born, moving back in with her own parents in Ohio. He's working construction now. Trying to pay off the restitution, the court ordered him to pay me for the damages to the library wall. Every check I receive from the State Disbursement Center is a reminder that actions have costs. My parents are living in a state-subsidized senior housing complex in Revere. It's small. It's cramped. And they hate it. They tell everyone who will listen, their neighbors, the nurses, the mailman, that their ungrateful daughter stole their fortune. Let them talk. Their narrative is the only thing they have left to own. I realized something up here, looking down at the city we used to share. Freedom isn't free. It has a heavy overhead cost. It costs you people. It costs you the illusion of a happy family. It costs you the comfort of pretending everything is okay just to keep the peace. But looking at the ledger of my life now, the silence, the safety, the ownership of my own future, I know the truth. The price was cheap. I took a sip of my coffee. The wind off the ocean was cold. But for the first time in my life, I didn't freeze. I've never felt warmer. If you've ever had to choose your own peace over your family's demands, share this story. You are not alone.